There exists a kind of woman whose nature is not studied in common households, nor discussed openly in courts, but she rules more effectively than many crowned monarchs. She does not command armies, yet her victories are complete. She does not raise her voice, and yet entire lives are bent to her will. Her influence is not the kind written in blood or declared through battle. Hers is the dominion of suggestion, of silent sabotage. Unlike the tempestuous or openly volatile, this woman conquers not through force, but through the carefully honed art of psychological seduction, employing the tools of illusion and disorientation. To the untrained observer, she is neither threat nor tyrant. On the contrary, she seems to be everything that inspires trust, softness, and safety. This is why she is effective. She understands, consciously or not, that the surest way to enslave a man is to make him believe he is choosing his own chains. It would be foolish to speak of such power in terms of beauty, youth, or station. The essence of her power does not reside in her form, but in her formlessness, her ability to reflect the desires and fears of those who approach her. She does not need to speak loudly because the silence she cultivates is filled by your own projections. You assume her to be kind because she smiles. You trust her because she listens. You believe she is harmless because she seems to have no weapon. But that is the deception. Her weapons are not fashioned from steel, but from suggestion, from timing, from calculated glances and carefully timed silences. She conquers not with armies, but with mirrors. And the reflection she offers you is always tailored to your particular weakness. The philosopher Jung, whom we may regard as a cartographer of the soul's underworld, examined such women not with judgment, but with precision. He saw in them the embodiment of a force that lies dormant in many, but awakens only in those who have either suffered greatly or refused to confront their own darkness. He called it the anima when referring to the unconscious feminine within a man, but warned also of the external manifestation, the woman who carries within her a volatile shadow and unleashes it not with intent, but with instinct sharpened by pain. This kind of woman rarely knows her own power fully. That is what makes her dangerous. She does not seek to harm as a tyrant does. She believes herself innocent. She will speak of love, of wounds, of softness. But what she offers is not love. It is enmeshment, not affection but dependency, not warmth but a fire that burns selectively, withholding heat when it is most needed. She does not destroy as a lion destroys, but as ivy does, slowly, invisibly, wrapping itself around your structure until you no longer remember what it felt like to stand upright. And this is no moral condemnation. A ruler must understand all forms of influence. He must study both the blade and the whisper. In my lifetime, I have observed that the visible tyrant is far less of a threat than the soft-spoken one who makes you grateful to serve. What makes her dangerous is not malice. It is unconsciousness. She believes her wounds are virtues. She believes her control is care. And so she recruits you, not through command, but through need. Her smile hides a contract, and the terms are always vague, always shifting. At first, she reflects your ideals. She becomes the embodiment of what you desire most: validation, understanding, warmth. And because she knows, intuitively or otherwise, that men crave being recognized for their potential, she will mirror back to you your strengths. You will feel larger in her presence, more complete. But that is where the seduction begins, for no one can live forever in a reflection. Eventually, the glass cracks, and what emerges is not the muse but the strategist. She will never demand directly. Her power lies in implication. A sigh at the wrong moment, a delay in affection, a subtle glance that leaves you questioning your tone, your decisions, your very worth. She builds no prison walls, and yet you will find yourself caged. not by her hands, but by your own loyalty, not by her demands, but by your own fear of losing what you believed she represented. You begin to edit yourself, to measure your words, to forfeit boundaries you once held sacred, all for the chance to maintain her warmth, a warmth which you increasingly sense is conditional. Jung's genius lay in observing that this dynamic is not evil. It is inevitable when the unconscious remains unexamined. The shadow left untended will find expression. In some, it becomes anger. In others, manipulation. And in the most dangerous, it becomes charm. It becomes the ability to entangle without force, to control without appearing to command. And in doing so, it extracts loyalty, energy, and even identity from those who do not recognize the snare until it has already closed. I have seen princes and peasants alike fall not to swords, but to the illusion of affection. I have watched generals abandon strategy for the sake of maintaining a woman's approval. I have seen statesmen silence their own principles, not from fear of death, but from fear of distance, of disapproval. And in all these cases, the woman in question believed she was simply loving, simply being herself. That is the brilliance of the unconscious. It always believes itself innocent. Now let us examine her method more closely. She does not confront. She withdraws. She does not accuse. She insinuates. She does not punish. She becomes absent. And it is this absence, this coldness that arrives without announcement, that functions as the most powerful lever of all. For man is not so afraid of punishment as he is of abandonment, and once he believes that he is the reason for her withdrawal, he becomes pliable. He seeks to restore the connection, not realizing that this connection has become a currency, a negotiation table where affection is exchanged for compliance. Her instability masquerades as passion. Her mood swings appear as depth. Her unpredictability is mistaken for mystery. And because most men are not taught to distinguish between true emotional resonance and reactive projection, they remain in the game, believing that if they simply try harder, love more, correct their behavior, they can restore harmony. But harmony was never the goal. Control was, not conscious control. No, that would be easier to detect. It is the control of chaos, of unpredictability, of the ever-shifting rules that keep one off balance. You may believe you are giving to her, but what you are truly sacrificing is not effort. It is your sovereignty. You shape yourself not to serve her needs, but to avoid her silence. You betray yourself not for her approval, but for the illusion of peace. And in doing so, you do not simply lose love. You lose clarity. You lose the thread of who you are, one compromise at a time. Jung warned, what remains unconscious will direct your life and you will call it fate. I would amend that slightly. What you refuse to see becomes your master, and it will cloak itself in the image of your greatest desire. That is her power. She does not force you to obey. She seduces you into believing it was your idea. And when at last the illusion cracks, when you begin to see the pattern rather than the person, it is already late. The losses have accumulated. The internal erosion is evident. You are no longer the man you were, not because she took something from you, but because you gave it, freely, foolishly, under the mistaken belief that you were building love, when in fact, you were constructing your own submission. But take note, this is not merely about the woman. She is the instrument, not the origin. The true enemy is always within, the craving for validation, the aversion to conflict, the fantasy that love must resemble struggle. These are the vulnerabilities she exploits, whether knowingly or not. And thus, the battle is not with her, it is with yourself. She cannot rule what you do not surrender. She cannot confuse a mind that is rooted in its own truth. In statecraft, as in relationships, one must never confuse charm with loyalty, nor intensity with safety. The one who stirs your soul most deeply may also be the one most capable of unraveling it. And yet, this unraveling is not always a curse. Sometimes it is a revelation. You will not find peace in her arms, but you may find truth in the aftermath. You may discover the depths of your own weakness, your own hunger, your own delusions. And if you survive it, truly survive it, you may also find something rarer, the will to never again trade your peace for someone else's chaos. Let us speak clearly. The greatest tragedy is not that men fall into this trap, but that they seldom know how it happened. It arrives not like a storm with wind and thunder, but like a gentle breeze through an open window. You believe you are breathing fresh air, unaware that it carries a slow and invisible poison. In my years observing the affairs of rulers and common men alike, I have seen wars declared with less devastation than that inflicted by such a woman upon a single mind. You do not wake up chained. No, it begins with admiration. She studies you, not with books, but with silence. She listens when others interrupt. She smiles when others criticize. She gives you the one thing every man, regardless of status, secretly yearns for, the feeling of being seen. Not for what you are, but for what you imagine yourself to be. She becomes the mirror of your fantasies, and you think, at last someone understands. What you fail to realize is that it is not you she sees, it is your hunger. And hunger, my friend, is the easiest thing in the world to manipulate. She does not offer herself openly. She dangles pieces, hints of affection, glimmers of intimacy, enough to spark pursuit, never enough to satisfy it. And like a politician promising reform, she always leaves you believing that the next gesture, the next moment, the next sacrifice will bring fulfillment. But it never arrives. Because satisfaction was never the goal. Engagement was. In matters of state, we often speak of negotiations, terms, contracts, boundaries. In love, the unwise man forgets that similar principles apply. He gives without terms. He offers without limits. And the woman I speak of collects these offerings not with gratitude, but with quiet expectation. Her affection becomes currency. Her silence becomes punishment. You soon discover that the cost of a single moment of her disapproval outweighs any pleasure she ever gave. And so you change, not once, but endlessly. You become a shapeshifter, abandoning yourself in increments, mistaking this self-erasure for love. I have seen men on the battlefield show more courage than they display in their own homes, terrified to speak their truth to a woman who has never raised a weapon, but who knows exactly how to make silence feel like exile. This is not physical domination. This is psychological warfare at its most refined. It is not cruelty in the traditional sense. It is dependency manufactured through ambiguity, through subtle disapproval, through the calculated distribution of warmth and distance. And here lies the cruelty of it. She believes herself innocent. She does not recognize her silence as violence. She does not understand that her fragility is a blade. She sees herself as wounded, soft, giving. But the very qualities she uses to justify her behavior are the ones that entangle. Because what you are drawn to is not her power. It is her need. Her instability becomes your purpose. Her emotional chaos becomes your map. You orient yourself around her moods, abandoning your own compass. Jung understood this. He saw that the most dangerous aspect of the unconscious is not its malice, it is its subtlety. It doesn't need to lie, it only needs to remain unseen. And in a woman who has never confronted her own shadow, this unseen force governs every interaction, not out of choice but out of survival. She believes she is loving, but her love is a maze, Her approval is a prize you never win. Her presence is a feast you're always too late to enjoy. It is tempting to blame her. But as I have written before, power is never granted. It is taken or surrendered. She can only manipulate the part of you that fears abandonment. She can only hook the piece of you that equates love with struggle. And so the war you think you are fighting with her is in fact a war with yourself. She is the battlefield, but the enemy is your own reflection. That is what makes her so effective. She awakens not just desire, but delusion. You will find yourself explaining her behavior to friends who look at you with concern. You will say, "She's just sensitive," or "She's been through a lot," or "She didn't mean it." But each excuse is a brick in the wall you are building around your own clarity. You do not protect her. You obscure yourself. And the longer you stay, the more fluent you become in self-betrayal. Until one day, the man you once were becomes a stranger in the mirror, whispering to you from behind glass you do not know how to break. I have advised princes in matters of betrayal. I have seen alliances crumble not from swords, but from silence. And I tell you now, the most dangerous traitor is not the one who breaks your trust openly, but the one who teaches you to doubt yourself. Because once you no longer trust your own perception, you are no longer free. You are no longer sovereign. You are no longer capable of resistance. You begin to think twice before laughing too loudly, in case it upsets her. You censor yourself in conversations. You anticipate her moods like a servant reading the stars. You adapt. You fold. You retreat. Not because she commands it, but because you are conditioned to avoid the cold. Her absence becomes your governor. Her approval becomes your drug. And like any addiction, the cost rises over time while the pleasure diminishes. And then comes the most cruel illusion of all. You begin to think this is love. You confuse anxiety with passion. You interpret unpredictability as depth. You convince yourself that the highs and lows are proof of meaning. And because you have never experienced calm love, you believe that the storm is necessary. But storms only feel meaningful when peace is unfamiliar. This is why men remain, not because she binds them, but because they do not know how to walk away. Because to walk away would mean admitting they were deceived, not by her, but by their own illusions. And there is no wound more painful than that of disillusionment. In the art of power, the first lesson is always this: he who controls the narrative controls the kingdom. And she, whether knowingly or not, becomes the author of your emotional narrative. She decides when you feel cherished and when you feel discarded. She becomes the judge, jury, and executioner of your self-worth. And you, once a man of principles, boundaries, and direction, become a servant in her court, dancing for crumbs. Jung warned that the feminine shadow, unintegrated, does not destroy with flame, but with fog. You do not see it coming. You simply wake one morning in a house you do not recognize, wearing a life that no longer fits, wondering how you became so small. And yet, even then, many do not leave. They hope, they believe. They stay loyal to the version of her that existed only at the beginning, the version she crafted with expert precision to lure them in. But that version was a costume, not a character. And the longer you chase it, the more lost you become. Some will argue that this woman is not a villain but a victim, that her behavior is the product of trauma, not intent, and they may be correct. But as I have often said, the motivations of a tyrant do not absolve his tyranny. It is not her pain that makes her dangerous, it is her refusal to examine it. And in that refusal she becomes the source of pain for others. You cannot save her. You cannot fix her. You cannot love her into wholeness. The belief that you can is not compassion, it is ego. And that ego, when tethered to her shadow, becomes your prison. So what then is the solution? Awareness. Brutal, unflinching awareness. You must become more loyal to your truth than to her emotions, more devoted to clarity than to connection, more invested in sovereignty than in salvation. You must be willing to disappoint her in order to remain loyal to yourself. And that is the cost of freedom. It is not comfortable, it is not romantic, but it is the only path to reclaiming your mind. To leave her is not betrayal, it is strategy. It is the calculated retreat of a general who recognizes a battle that cannot be won. It is the refusal to wage war in terrain designed to confuse and deplete. It is the act of reclaiming command over your own psyche, your own values, your own dignity. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The fog begins to lift. The silence loses its sting. Her absence, once a terror, becomes a relief. You begin to remember who you were before her. Not the man who needed permission to feel whole, but the one who knows that love without respect is nothing but control wearing perfume. And perhaps, if fate allows, she too will awaken. Perhaps she will confront her shadow. Perhaps she will learn to love without needing to conquer. But that is not your task. Your task is to remember that a man who trades his peace for proximity has already lost. True power is not domination. It is not submission. It is alignment. And the man who is aligned within himself cannot be ruled by suggestion, nor derailed by charm. He sees clearly. He acts decisively. He does not apologize for his clarity. He does not negotiate with fog. And so I say to you, not as a philosopher, but as a strategist, walk away, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with certainty. For the kingdom you abandon today was never yours. It was a theater of illusion, and the moment you leave it behind, you become ruler once again of yourself. Freedom, once lost to illusion, must be clawed back with ruthless precision. A man does not simply stumble out of this entanglement. He must extract himself piece by piece, like a prisoner escaping a velvet cage. And yet even as he leaves, the echo of her still lingers, not her voice, not her body, but the part of himself he invested in the fantasy. That is the final ghost one must face, not the woman, but the belief she allowed you to sustain. You must understand, no tyrant rules alone. Her power required your permission. Her dominion was not granted by force. It was conferred by your need to be seen, saved, needed. And the greatest cost of such need is always sovereignty. This Jung understood. The unconscious will wear the mask of desire, of love, of destiny itself, so long as it is left unexamined. And while she may have played her role masterfully, the stage was built from your own longing. You believed her coldness was depth. You mistook silence for mystery. You told yourself her moods were marks of complexity rather than instability. But in truth, the game was always simple. You were being trained, conditioned to respond not to truth but to approval, not to honesty but to avoidance. Her affection, once freely given, became a lever, and you, believing yourself in control, handed her the handle. Men lose empires for less, and here is where the war turns inward. Even after escape, you may find yourself haunted, not by her, but by your own questions. How did I not see? Why did I tolerate so much? Where did I go? These are not weaknesses. They are the beginning of awareness. The battlefield may be behind you, but the reconstruction is ahead, and it begins with facing the parts of yourself that stayed when every instinct said to run. You see, the woman who operates from the unconscious feminine shadow is not an aberration. She is not a witch nor a myth. She is a product of a world that taught her to be small, then rewarded her for being strategic. She didn't create the tools of manipulation. She discovered them in silence, in abandonment, in being unseen. Her charm was forged in survival, her unpredictability perfected through pain. But just as a man must not confuse power with cruelty, he must not confuse understanding with obligation. Her pain does not entitle her to your sacrifice. Her wounds do not justify the erosion of your sanity. Compassion does not mean compliance, and here is where many men falter. They wish to rescue her, to restore her, to prove that love can fix what shadow has broken. But love is not a salve for dysfunction. It is not a sanctuary for chaos. Love, true love, requires consciousness. Anything less is a transaction written in tears. I have advised rulers who confused sentiment with duty, who kept traitors close because of shared memories. And I have seen those kingdoms fall, not because of swords, but because of sentimentality. Let this be your lesson. She may have once been soft, kind, even radiant. But if her presence now costs you your clarity, she's no longer a queen. She's a queen maker of ruins. And still, some will ask, was it ever real? The beginning, the connection, the way she looked at you as if you were the only man on earth. And I will say this, yes, it was real for the moment. Because illusion, when believed by both the giver and the receiver, becomes indistinguishable from truth. But time exposes all illusions, and real love does not require performance. Real affection does not demand the abandonment of self. Real connection does not thrive on fear. The man who rises from this wreckage must do so with new principles. First, he must guard his perception. What you see is what you serve. If you cannot see her clearly, you will serve a fantasy. Second, he must reclaim his boundaries. A king who does not guard his gates will not rule for long. Third, and most crucial, he must be willing to walk away from anything that costs him his peace. For peace, once lost, is not easily regained. You may think yourself broken. You are not. You are simply misaligned. And the pain you feel now is not weakness. It is recalibration. It is the body and soul remembering how to function without being dictated by emotional turbulence. It is the nervous system unlearning the belief that love must hurt, that silence must be deciphered, that warmth must be earned. There is no shame in having fallen. Every man who seeks depth must, at some point, confront shadow. But wisdom lies not in avoidance. It lies in recognition. You must become the kind of man who sees the shadow not as evil, but as a signal, the red flag, the gut twist, the moment of hesitation. These are not inconveniences, they are intelligence, and in a world where most are blinded by charm, your discernment is your kingdom. Jung did not warn against women. He warned against unawareness. He knew that power, true power, does not lie in domination nor in avoidance, but in integration. The man who has faced his own shadow cannot be manipulated by hers. The man who knows his own wounds will not bleed for hers. The man who has made peace with solitude will not sell his soul for companionship. You must become this man, not just for yourself, but for every future moment that demands your clarity, for every decision that rests on your steadiness, for every love that deserves your full, sovereign presence. You are not here to orbit another's chaos. You are not here to decode someone's silence. You are here to lead with strength, with vision, with peace. And now, let us speak of her one final time. She will move on. She may cry or she may not. She may blame you or say nothing at all. She may find another, repeat the cycle, recreate the pattern. That is no longer your concern. She is not your enemy. She was your mirror. She reflected the parts of you still longing for validation, still afraid of abandonment, still unsure of your worth. She came to teach you through pain what peace could not. And now that lesson is learned, you owe her nothing more. Not your presence, not your defense, not your explanation, only your silence. That silence, once weaponized against you, becomes your final boundary. Let it stand like a wall between you and the chaos that once called itself love. You will heal, not because time erases, but because truth restores. You will remember how it feels to laugh without calculation, to speak without editing, to breathe without waiting for punishment. You will rise, not as a victim of her shadow, but as a man reborn by fire. The world does not need more men who chase illusions. It needs men who see clearly, who walk away from confusion, who choose calm over chaos, depth over drama, truth over fantasy. Men who do not ask to be loved in exchange for vanishing themselves. This woman, the one who manipulates without knowing, who seduces with instability, who mirrors what she cannot embody, she will only ever have power over the man who has not yet claimed his own reflection. But you now are different. You have walked the labyrinth. You have touched the fire. And you have emerged, scarred perhaps, but sovereign. And so I leave you with this. Do not chase the illusion. Study it. Understand it. Master it. And then let it go. Do not hate her. She is what she is. A symbol, a lesson, a test. But do not return to her. And above all, never again abandon your truth for anyone's approval. Your peace is not a luxury, it is your crown. Wear it and rule